The day.
Hey guys, it's Alec Torelli and welcome to the Hand of the Day. Today's hand comes from an awesome game of Poker Night in America that I played at the Seminole Hard Rock last year. So crazy hand. I got asked about this hand many times. I think it was aired on CBS recently, and so I got a lot of requests to analyze it, and I'm finally getting around to it today. This hand is between me and Dwan on Poker Night in America and 25-50 blinds. We get a raise from Conniff to 175 early position, and Dwan makes it 325 with 8-7 of clubs. So a really small 3-bet, kind of weird, like in position, sort of trying to just keep the lead in the hand, maybe get other players to fold and just keep the pot heads up in position, and maybe even make a 3-bet small enough that he can call if Conniff 4-bets or whatever, and it's a decent strategy. I mean, it's like isolate people, get it heads up, but I'd seen him do this several times, so I knew this was sort of like his game plan, and that he probably didn't have a super strong hand when he did it, and this was sort of just the way he was playing all of his hands. So he was doing this very often, a little too often to really have a premium hand here. I look down at Ace Queen in the big blind, and I make it 1500. I think that I'm really likely to have the best hand at this point, and my hand is sort of awkward to play if I just call. I let Conniff in the pot. Maybe now Conniff 4-bets, maybe he 4-bets with a bluff, maybe 4-bets with a good hand. It's really just a terrible spot for me. I'm basically calling and then hoping that Conniff folds, and I'm still out of position. So I think raising is clear the best play here if I'm going to play the hand at all. And if Dwan was a different player, if it was a different situation, I might just opt to fold here if my opponent's range is a little bit stronger. Anyway, I make it 1500, a solid 4-bet size. I think it's pretty good size out of position when the pot is already building. Conniff folds, and we get around to Dwan, who now makes it like 3300. So he basically like clicks it back like a min raise. And at this point, I just really felt like he didn't have it. And that's ultimately what led me to play the rest of the hand the way I did. And in live poker, some of the times when you have, you can analyze things from a math perspective and say, okay, what's his range here? How does my hand play against his range? And am I likely to be way ahead? Am I likely to be way behind? What percent of the time is he bluffing? Those are all sort of things you could quantify from an analytical standpoint. But in live poker, it's really important to take a step back and just go with your gut sometimes and say, what is my gut telling me? And that's something that you really can't quantify from an analytical standpoint. It's just a feeling that comes to you. So it's really important to take a step back, breathe, be present, and just be listening to the reads and the sensations that you're getting while playing poker. And in this spot, I really felt like Dwan just didn't have it. So a lot of people ask about the difference between math and intuition, and I always say that the intuition you get sort of affects the math that's involved. So when I get the feeling like my opponent is bluffing, and I get a very strong feeling, then that sort of affects the math that is in the hand, right? It affects the range that my opponent can have. So it makes it more likely that he's bluffing, less likely that he has something like 2 aces, and the equity that my hand has against his range or his hand goes up because my instinct tells me that he's bluffing, so that sort of affects the math. And so I think about things in that way, and I think that really helped me throughout this hand, and it's helped me a lot in my poker game throughout my career. So I have a tough decision here at this spot. The pot's like 5,000, 5,500, and we're pretty deep. We still have like 25,000 left, so I could, any raise that I would make, if I, 6-bet now, I'm sort of like committed to this pot, right? I could shove all in and just hope that my read is right, but I'm never getting called by a worse hand, and I'm getting a great price to call with my direct odds. So it's like if I shove all in, I'm basically never getting called by a worse hand, whereas if I call, it's good for my range because I still could be trapping with something like aces. I would play aces this way, I would play kings this way, and so it sort of protects my range, it keeps my range more balanced, it makes me harder to play against, but also I have more room to like play the hand out and maneuver post-flop, and I think that post-flop is where I generally will have the biggest edge, so I want to get myself to that situation when things are close like this. So that was my thoughts going into it. I think it could go both ways. I mean, maybe you could opt for a shove here if you're very, very sure, but you have to be pretty damn sure because you're risking a lot of money to win what is already in the pot, and you're in a terrible spot if you get called. So I opt to call here out of position and call the 5-bet. So we have a huge pot brewing, like 7,000, and we go heads up to the flop. The flop comes 9-3-3 rainbow. I check, Bond bets 3,500, which is about half the pot. I feel like if he was bluffing pre-flop, he's always going to take a stab at this flop. So this flop really didn't change anything unless he somehow has a 9 or a 3 in his hand. If I had the best hand pre-flop, I still have the best hand on the flop. Also, I'm getting a pretty good price, right? He bet 3,500, he's bet half the pot, so I'm getting a pretty damn good price to call here and, see what happens in the rest of the hand. I think it is a vulnerable spot to be in that if he decides to continue bluffing, I'm in a really tough spot on the turn, but at the same time, I 4-bet pre-flop, I called a 5-bet, and I called a bet on the flop. It's like, even if he has the intention or ambition to bluff, at some point he's got to be like, well, this is a pretty bad spot for me because, most of the time my opponent's going to have 2 aces here, and I'm just going to get snapped off drawing stone dead if I bluff the turn. So I think that my hand is pretty protected, and I think that's gives a lot of credence to why calling pre-flop is just so valuable, because it makes it really tough for my opponent to continue bluffing here. Even if he wants to bluff, it's just really, really tough because it looks like I have a monster. So I go ahead and check call here and just gonna see what happens to the hand. Maybe plan on just going check on the turn, check the river, and pretty much hoping to win at showdown. Turn comes a 7, bringing a flush draw. I check, and Bon now checks behind. So at this point, I'm thinking, there's a chance my hand is good. There's still a very good chance my hand is good, but this 7 and the 9 is sort of complicated cards, because if he was 4-betting pre-flop with any sort of rundown, like a suited connector type of hand, there's a decent chance he has a pair. So the 7's, kind of a bad card for me, and it's also like if he did have something like 10-8 or 8-6 or 4-5. He probably would have, or 5-6, excuse me, a double gutter, then he probably would have bluffed the turn again, because he picked up a lot of equity, and if he had spades, he would have bluffed as well. So when he checks here, it's like there's a decent chance my hand is good, but there is some chance that he has a pair at this point, and I'm just behind. He checks behind. We go heads up to the river, which is a 5. Now at this point, it's like all of his, there's 2 sorts of things I'm considering. One is, what's the likelihood that my hand is good? And is there a way I could win more money in this hand? If my hand is good, is it better, it's probably better to check and hope that he bluffs and check call. But is it really likely that he's gonna bluff the river after checking the turn? It's like, what sort of story is he really telling here? So if I check, and he's really, really likely to check behind, right? He's really unlikely to have a hand that has any strength, because he probably would have bet the turn if he did. And if he didn't bet the turn, he's probably doesn't have a hand that's good enough to bet the river. So it's really unlikely he's gonna bet this river at all. And it's also sort of likely that, like what I talked about on the turn, all those suited rundown hands, like any hand 9x suited, 8x suited, 7x suited, 6x suited, 5x suited, all now have a pair. So like 10-9 down to 5-4, now all have a pair. And those are a lot of the likely hands that he's been 3-betting with pre-flop, and that if he's bluffing pre-flop, he's probably going to be bluffing with those as well. Also ace-x suited, king-x suited, maybe he has like king-7, king-5. Now these hands have pairs. The other thing I'm considering is what does my hand look like? So I 4-bet pre-flop, I called a 5-bet, I check-called the flop. Ace-queen is literally the absolute worst hand I could ever have. Almost always in this spot, I'm gonna have 2 10s, 2 jacks, 2 queens, 2 kings, 2 aces, maybe ace-king. And there's also a chance that he has ace-king and I could fold him off a chop. Or I fold him off, I don't fold him off a chop, I fold him off a hand that I would lose to. So this is the absolute worst hand I could have. And if you think about it, it makes sense that I bluff here. And even if he knows I'm bluffing with ace-king or ace-queen, he still can't really call, because so often I'm going to have overpairs, and I'm just going to have aces or kings or whatever. So I still don't think that even if he thinks that there's a chance I'm bluffing, that he really can call here. And it's so hard for him to call with something like a 7 or a 5. I think most of the time he's just going to snap fold that, and my hand looks like 2 aces and whatever. So I decided to bet 10,500 and 15,000. I have to bet pretty damn big here because I am repping an overpair, and I do need to win this pot. I can't bet 4,000 and just hope to win. I could make a bigger bet. I could bet like 15 or 20,000, but I just think when I bet too big, it sort of makes it look like I'm either bluffing or have like aces specifically or like nines full. So I want to make it look like I still could have like queens, be value betting with something like queens, maybe even jacks, something like that, and be going for value. So I need to bet an amount that's big enough to get him to fold, but also small enough that my hand still makes sense, that the story I'm telling is still credible. So I bet 10,500, and he really makes me sweat here. After a long time debating, he hems and haws, and he finally gets it through. And I was just sitting there during the hand, just sitting there like, you know, telling myself like, you know, I have it, I'm confident, I know I'm making the right play, I don't care if he calls because I know that I play this hand the best way possible. And at the end of the day, that's really all you have to hang on to, right? You just know that you've made the best decision and you let things happen as they are. To my satisfaction, to my fortune, he folded, I won a huge pot, and this was one of the coolest hands I've definitely played on Poker Night in America.
I really felt like I read the situation right. I had a plan in trapping him the whole time. I thought he was really weak pre-flop. And on the river, I felt like he actually made a pair when I thought that I could represent a hand like aces, kings, or queens by betting. And I just thought that he would fold to a big bet. And so I just put him in a tough spot, and it worked out for me.
Found it really dynamic. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like this style of analysis, you like these hand of the day episodes, you like how I analyze poker, highly encourage you to check out my premier poker training products, alectorelli.com/products. You can click one of these links here as well, and you'll get access to really the best poker content that I do put out. I do a lot of the types of teaching that I do in these videos, which is conceptual-based learning. So it's not just like we analyze one specific hand, and if you're not in that hand or that situation, you're not going to take anything from it. It's really about using the hand as like a metaphor, or using the hand as a way to understand the deeper concepts and strategies that could apply to every situation in poker and versus every opponent. And when the variables change, like the stack sizes or the players or your position, or whether you're playing cash games or tournaments, you can apply the concepts in the 4 Steps to Beating Anyone at Poker or my pre-flop training guide, and you can use that to win more money at the table in any situation you face versus any opponent. So I highly encourage you to check it out, alectorelli.com/products. If you guys have questions, shoot me an email on my website, my contact form. I sincerely read every single email, and I'll get back to you guys. Otherwise, leave a comment here with what you think about this hand. I'm excited to see what you guys think. What would you have done? Would you have played it differently? Would you call if you're Bon? Would you bluff if you're me? Let me know in a comment below. If you have hands you'd like me to review, subscribe to my channel. Subscribers always get first priority. And send them to me. I'll pick the best ones and feature them here on this channel in the future. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. See you guys next time for the hand of the day. Cheers.